Houston, we have a problem. And here it is. A few nuggets ago, we were able to go ahead and connect via HTTPS from our management PC over to the Firewall 1 and over to Firewall 2 to use the web user interface from our PC to manage both of those. And ever since we updated the security policy, published it, and then installed it on both firewalls, we are no longer able to successfully use SSL to connect from PC 1 over to Firewall 2. And our mission, should we choose to accept it, is to identify in our security policy why that's happening and correct the problem. And very often, one of the common first steps when doing troubleshooting is to replicate the problem, to verify that we have a problem. So if from PC1 we are unable to connect to the web user interface on Firewall 2, let's go ahead and verify that that is broken. So we'll go ahead and double click on this shortcut for the web user interface for Firewall 2, and survey says sure enough, it's not working. Okay, so it's timing out. And just for a sanity check, I'm going to try to go to the web user interface for Firewall 1 just to verify I have basic connectivity. Great. So Firewall 1 is working. Firewall 2 is not. And that did work before we had the policy change. So let's go ahead and close the browser windows. And we'll launch Smart Console. And as this loads up, if you'd like to practice alongside of me, you're welcome to do that. There's a link if you log on to cptnuggets.com for this nugget. There's a link for the virtual lab so you can practice hands-on right alongside of me. So with the username admin and our lab password supplied, we'll click Login. So here on the Gateways and Servers tab, it indicates that the management server still has connectivity with Firewall 1 and Firewall 2. That's a good thing. So the management server can still see Firewall 2, even though we can't connect from our management PC over to it using HTTPS. So let's go ahead and take a look at our security policy. So we'll click on the Security Policies tab. So here we have some sections and some parents, and we can expand those parents to see the inline layers. And as we consider this policy, let's think about the traffic from PC1 using a browser and HTTPS to connect over to Firewall 2. So in the parent rule here, that would match because the traffic is sourced from the PC and it's going to Firewall 2. And then as a result, we'd go down to rule 1.1, and that should match right there from the management PC going to Firewall 2 with HTTPS, and it has accept. So based on this, it says it should go ahead and work. And also we're logging. So let's take a closer look and verify that. We'll click on rule 1.1, and then down below, I'm going to bring this up just a little bit so we can see a little better. And with the logs tab selected, sure enough, right there, we have the matching traffic. Let me just remove the source user field for a moment here. I'll right click on it and then select hide column and make these a little bigger. So this is interesting. For rule 1.1, which is accepting or permitting that traffic, it indicates right here today that the management PC, 192.168.1.120, going to Firewall 2 at its outside address using HTTPS with TCP port 443 with the access rule 1.1, it was permitted. And that's this indicator right here. So the next question might be, well, why didn't our HTTPS session work if it was permitted? And that's a good question. So let's take a look at our final cleanup rule here. The cleanup rule is what goes in force if nothing else in the policy prior to that was matched. And here on the cleanup rule with it highlighted, and we're doing logging on it as well, if we click on the logs tab down here, check this out. This indicates that the source was the management PC, the destination was Firewall 2, it was HTTPS using TCP port 443, and it was rule 3, the cleanup rule, that actually killed that traffic. So how could it be that one rule matched and it permitted the traffic, and yet another rule matched and denied the traffic? And the secret is that this is coming from, the deny is coming from Firewall 2. And that's because when we deployed this and set it up, we only specified that it should be applied to Firewall 1. And as a result, none of this portion of our policy was applied to Firewall 2. And as a result, Firewall 2 went through the rest of the rules, didn't see a match, and then said, well, I guess I'm going to kill it because it doesn't match any of my prior rules. It matches the cleanup rule, and I'm going to go ahead and drop it. So now the question is, how do we solve this? We have a few options. One of the options would be to create additional entries for a policy that would be pushed over to Firewall 2, or we could just modify this parent and its couple children so that instead of installing this portion of our policy only on Firewall 1, we include Firewall 2 as well. And that way it would include this permit for the HTTPS going from the management PC to Firewall 2's interface, and it wouldn't be dropped. So let's go ahead and do that. So we could either manually add firewall 2 to the install on policy here for these rules, or we could just remove firewall 1 by selecting it, hitting the delete key, and repeating that for child rules 1.1 and 1.2. And as a result, it would then default to policy targets, which would include all of our firewalls, both firewall 1 and firewall 2. So with that change made, we'll go ahead and click on Publish. We'll then click on Install Policy. We're going to push this out to both firewall 1 and firewall 2. We'll click Install. And now that that's had a few moments to complete, great. Let's go ahead and let's test from our management PC to see whether or not we can now access firewall 2 using a browser and HTTPS. So we'll minimize Smart Console. We'll go ahead and double click on the shortcut over here on the desktop for Web User Interface for firewall 2. Cross our fingers, and ta-da! We are now connected, which is fantastic. In this nugget, we've done 3 basic things. Number 1, we identified something that was not working, and it came after a policy change. 2, we used the log information to help identify what the problem was. And then 3rd, we corrected the issue by modifying the policy, pushing it out, and then verifying that it worked. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.